Dinghai Fusheng Records. Chapter 7. Change. Feng Qianjun inspected the corpses that had been cleaved into two that were in disarray on the ground. All 20 or so corpses had been cut by Xiang Shu in an instant with just one swing of his saber, and the cuts were all clean and neat. However, this group of living corpses were still alive. After their heads were severed from their bodies, their broken arms still twitched and spasmed, which made Feng Qianjun's scalp tingle. AI. Feng Qianjun saw Chen Xing running into the woods to give chase and immediately shouted, "Don't go." Chen Xing looked back. "I have to check on that bastard. I'm an exorcist, I'll be alright. Wait here for me." Feng Qianjun swiftly withdrew his saber and was about to chase after Chen Xing when he heard the sound of hooves striking the ground in the distance. He promptly hid within the bushes for its advantage in launching a sneak attack if something were to go awry. However, the people who came were a group of Jin soldiers. Their leader held a torch, quickly dismounting his horse when he arrived at the center of this small battlefield. "There are also some here," the leader's voice constantly trembled. "Who killed them?" "What's here?" Feng Qianjun's voice traveled over from behind, and he pressed his saber against the leader's neck. The soldiers didn't expect that someone else would be here. All of them shouted angrily in succession, "Who are you?" "Speak," Feng Qianjun said coldly. "Did the government know about the abnormality of this place long ago? These monsters were all killed by you." The captain gasped. "How many more did you see?" With a subtle motion of his wrist, Feng Qianjun sliced a gash in the leader's neck. Blood spurted out everywhere, and the leader was immediately so frightened his entire body trembled. "I'll talk. I'll talk. Don't kill me." Feng Qianjun asked, "When did it start?" "Talk as you walk." Then he said to Chen Xing's dog, "Xiang Shu, wait here." More than a month ago," the leader shivered, "two villagers escaped from Longzhong village. They went to my city to report a case to the authorities, but none of the officials believed them and thought that it was just the Qin army's plan to create a diversion and lure the soldiers away." Chen Xing ran in the direction of Xiang Shu's departure in quick pursuit. After entering the woods, the road wound toward the deepest part halfway up the mountain. He made a turn around the mountain slope, where a village lay below it. "Chen Xing, there's even a village here?" He didn't see the slightest gleam of any light. It was already the time for roosters to crow, yet a deathly silence pervaded the village. Chen Xing lit up the light of the heart lamp in his left hand and pushed open the door of a house with his right. There was no one, and no corpses. It was as if the entire village had been evacuated overnight. "Where's everyone? Where did they all go?" Chen Xing closed his eyes and faced all four directions in turn. Suddenly, he sensed a flash of light. He was now almost absolutely certain that the heart lamp was guiding him to where Xiang Shu was. Xiang Shu was also indeed the protector martial god selected by the heart lamp, there's no mistake about that. More and more doubts accumulated inside Chen Xing's heart, but only Xiang Shu could answer these doubts of his. The light appeared in the north. There was another winding path there that led to higher ground on the north side of the village. Chen Xing hurried over, and a cemetery appeared in front of him. The center of the cemetery had been dug out and was exposed in the open, with dozens of uncovered stone coffins laying outside. A stone platform stood in the middle, and a masked man dressed in a black robe stood in front of it, his silhouette blending seamlessly with the pitch-black night. On the stone platform, there lay a tall warrior nearly 9 feet tall who was clad in black iron armor from head to toe and an iron helmet that covered his head. He was surrounded by wandering ghostly figures, which were actually standing, living corpses. At the periphery was a group of living corpses dressed in civilian clothes, while the inner circle was made up of a dozen or so Jin army soldiers. Upon observing this, an idea emerged unbidden in Chen Xian's mind. The masked man had played some kind of mysterious trick on this place and actually managed to turn all the people in the village into drought fiends, while the Jin army troops who had come to investigate the incident hadn't been able to avoid also being turned into drought fiends. After connecting it to the drought fiends he had encountered at night, Chen Xing began to speculate that maybe the drought fiends he saw were their patrolling soldiers. But silence had already fallen on all magic, and the spiritual chi of the heaven and earth had already been exhausted. What were the origins of this masked man? And what kind of magic was he using? Suddenly, an idea occurred to Chen Xing. He turned to face the other side of the cemetery and saw that behind a stone tablet, Xiangshu was currently kneeling on one knee and observing the situation. He gestured to Chen Xing repeatedly to get him to crouch down so that he wouldn't be discovered. Chen Xing quickly bent down, then ran to Xiangshu under the outer wall of the cemetery, which was about the height of half an adult. Chen Xing, who is he? Xiangshu didn't respond and just frowned as he observed the masked man casting a spell on the stone platform at the center. The man was utterly motionless, and only stood there. Living corpses were swarming around in silence, and the situation was inexplicably bizarre. What does he intend to do? Chen Xing lowered his voice and asked again. I don't know. Xiangshu answered in irritation, shut up. Chen Xing's doubts had reached their peak. He didn't possess an ounce of self-awareness that an exorcist should have, let alone consider that he should be the one answering questions and dispelling doubts at this time. Then how much longer do we need to stay here to watch? Chen Xing asked again. Xiangshu. Chen Xing realized that if he continued to ask questions, he was most likely going to get hit, so he had to keep quiet. However, he then noticed a row of cinnabar characters inscribed on the stone tablet they were hiding behind. He reached out to touch the sunken characters and recognized the 5 words carved on it: Great Jin Xiangyang Prince Wei. Sima Wei. The one buried in this cemetery was the royal Sima clan's prince of Chu who died in the War of the 8 Princes. Chen Xing immediately shifted his gaze to the center of the stone platform to look at the armor-clad corpse that lay flat on its back. With such an opulent black iron armor, the one adorning it definitely wouldn't be a civilian. That must be Sima Wei's body. But he has been dead for nearly 100 years. His corpse hasn't decayed yet? He saw the sorcerer's hands rise slightly, and Sima Wei's heavy body was lifted to stand in mid-air. At this moment, an invisible and powerful gale immediately stirred up in the surroundings that caused Chen Xing to shiver. It was a gust of yin wind, as mentioned in an old saying. Only an exorcist like him would know that it was the effect of the resentment that flowed within the world. Ordinary people who experience this cold and insidious wind are unaware of its origins and would only describe it as a yin wind. The yin wind was becoming stronger and stronger. It was the resentment that lingered in the human world from soldiers who had died in battle and all the commoners who lost their lives in the war within a 100-mile radius. Chen Xing immediately had a vague perception of the caster's true intention. It was not the spiritual chi of heaven and earth that he manipulated, but the abundant resentment of the dead after the huge war in Xiangyang City. He wanted to imbue the body of Sima Wei with it in order to revive the corpse. Although he was uncertain regarding this masked man's true motives, Chen Xing knew that he had to act immediately, because the spell had reached a critical juncture. Protector, Chen Xing whispered, we have to go out now to stop him. The moment he uttered this, Chen Xing's neck was seized by Xiangshu as if he were a little chick being restrained by the neck. If you want to go, then go yourself. Xiangshu whispered, don't expose my position, and I'm not a so-called protector either. Chen Xing gritted his teeth. He couldn't speak, but his gaze was bitter and indignant. Chen Xing vehemently gestured to emphasize to Xiangshu that the situation before them was already quite grave. He thought, if you aren't here to stop this real sorcerer from bringing forth disaster upon the human world, what did you run all the way here for? At that moment, a large group of Jin troops arrived with Feng Qianjun following behind, who wielded knives in both hands. Feng Qianjun ran to the edge of the cemetery, while the Jin soldiers held up torches one after another. Nearly 50 people rushed to the cemetery's periphery with great momentum. Xiangshu immediately relinquished his hold on Chen Xing. Both of them gestured in unison to the people who had arrived, but it was too late. The leader of the Jin troops trembled with fear as he shouted, instantly drawing the attention of the masked man. "Sorcerer, where are you from?" It was apparent that the leader couldn't speak with confidence, and he cried out with trepidation, quickly surrender to your arrest." The Jin army leader didn't see Xiang Shu and Chen Xing's warning, but Feng Qianjun did. He immediately turned and hid behind the outer wall of the cemetery, and motioned, "What do we do now?" Xiang Shu immediately waved his hand and grabbed Chen Xing, who was about to run out. All they heard was a sneer from the sorcerer who stood in front of the stone platform in the middle of the cemetery. He then spoke in a calm voice. Chen Xing hadn't even heard it clearly when nearly 100 living corpse villagers that had been turned into drought fiends lunged at the Jin troops. "Charge!" The leader shouted and led his men to charge on foot. They swung their knives and swiftly severed the heads of the living corpses, rotten blood spilling everywhere. Chen Xing glanced at Feng Qianjun, who wasn't far away. Feng Qianjun hid behind the wall and pointed at himself, then nodded at Chen Xing to mean, "Yes, I taught them." Chen Xing recalled the living corpses that had their brains smashed into mush at the foot of the cliff, so he stopped moving. He hurried to tell Xiang Shu, "Cut off their heads." After he spoke, Chen Xing appeared from behind the stone tablet and shouted, "Monsters! Die!" It was only after running a few steps that he realized he was unarmed. He quickly turned around and ran towards the leader. He shouted, "Lend me a sword." Feng Qianjun chased after him while wielding a saber and shouted, "Hurry and get back. Don't cause trouble." Chen Xing suddenly noticed a shovel used for digging in the cemetery and thought, "That's great." He followed behind the soldiers, swung the iron shovel, and smacked it onto the head of a living corpse. Xiang Shu's gaze on the masked man was unwavering. It was as if he was completely indifferent to the living corpses. In the next moment, when the man standing in front of the stone platform raised his hand, Xiang Shu flew out instantly. He stepped onto a stone coffin first, spun, landed beside Chen Xing, kicked Feng Qianjun who was on his other side, then lifted up the lid of a stone coffin that weighed nearly 200 jins with one hand and pressed against it while it was in front of him and Chen Xing. Feng Qianjun had just turned around when he was kicked flying to one side, while Chen Xing's face was filled with doubt. He looked up to see the masked man dressed in a black robe raise his hand to press against the air. Like ripples stirred up on water, a black flame flickered in his hand, and hundreds of black meteors shot out that scattered indiscriminately upon both the Jin guards and living corpses that were engaged in battle. As soon as the black flames came into contact with their bodies, the soldiers would howl in pain and roll frantically around on the ground. The stone coffin lid was hit and smashed into pieces. Xiang Shu endured the quake of the tremendous force, leaned down slightly, drew his sword, and turned into a shadow as he sped directly onto the altar in the middle of the stone platform with a whoosh. Too fast. He's so fast. Chen Xing was still gripping his shovel, and within the blink of an eye, only he, Xiang Shu, and Feng Qianjun remained standing in the cemetery. Everyone else had already fallen to the ground one after another. "Brother Feng!" Chen Xing shouted, "Where did they come from?" Feng Qianjun shouted, "Don't touch them." The moment the black flames came into contact with someone, they would begin burning. Chen Xing didn't dare touch it. Feng Qianjun stood up and shouted, "Behind you!" The Jin troops had all fallen, yet many living corpses still remained. At this moment, they began to encircle Chen Xing one after another. "Invoke light!" Feng Qianjun swung his saber and severed the heads of 2 living corpses from their bodies. He shouted, "They're afraid of light." As of this moment, Xiang Shu had already rushed onto the stone platform with large strides, his sword drawing an arc of light as he swung it with a buzz. The masked man immediately raised his hand to reveal a dagger from his right sleeve. It collided with Xiang Shu's attack with a clang. His dagger gleamed with the color of a conch shell dipped in poison. Xiang Shu gave him no chance to retaliate at all and stabbed towards the man's throat with his sword. "You're skilled." The masked man always had a hand directed at Sima Wei's body on the stone platform, while he struggled to deal with Xiang Shu's blade with his other. Within an instant, they had already exchanged 3 moves. The masked man saw that he wouldn't be able to continue withstanding Xiangshu's strikes, so he abruptly flew up, straightened his body, and had actually started flying. Xiangshu immediately retreated and looked up at the height 1 zhang away. He noticed that the masked man dared not fly far, his left hand was still directed at Sima Wei's body, guiding the invisible and endless resentment to imbue into the dead man's body. Xiangshu observed the masked man's every move, only to see his dagger disappear with a flutter of his right sleeve, and a small iron crossbow taking its stead. Sharp arrows appeared on the crossbow, a cold light flashed as the man looked down from above, he wanted to deliver a fatal hit to Xiangshu. At the same time, Fei Tian Ye broke out of his tight encirclement and ran towards Chen Xing, who was surrounded by living corpses. "Chen Xing, why did you bring so many soldiers over?" "Fei Tian Ye, they were the ones who knew the way here, what else could I have done?" "Why on earth are you so nosy?" Chen Xing raised his hand and shouted, "This is my job. How could it be considered being nosy?" Suddenly, the heart lamp's light burst forth from Chen Xing's hand, with the flash of the resplendent white light, the living corpses wailed instantaneously, scattering in surrender. The masked man saw the burst of white light and his living corpses getting suppressed, so he no longer concerned himself with Xiangshu and turned to look. "Get rid of them!" Fei Tian Ye shouted, "Hurry!" Chen Xing wasn't in imminent danger, but he grabbed a shovel in his right hand and lifted the heart lamp up with his left. He had intended to use the shovel to strike the heads of this group of living corpses, but the moment they were illuminated by the white light, the living corpses would instinctively escape in all directions. Chen Xing swung his shovel to smack them, but he always just ended up swinging at air. In the end, it devolved into a situation where living corpses would flee in haste wherever he went. He wasn't able to get close to any of them at all. Chaos descended upon the cemetery in a split second, as if a wolf had mixed in with a flock of sleep, and it seemed like chickens were flying and dogs were howling everywhere. "I can't hit them," Chen Xing said in annoyance. He was about to put out the heart lamp when Fei Tian Ye ran to the front of the wall and shouted, "Come here quickly." And thus, the scene became very bizarre. A young man held an iron shovel up high while his left hand shone with light as he herded a large group of living corpses to the west of the cemetery. The living corpses crowded together as they squeezed through the narrow road between 2 walls and passed through it noisily. Fei Tian Ye shouted, "Listen to my command, charge!" Chen Xing broke into a run. When the group of living corpses were chased after by the heart lamp like that, they sped up instantaneously. The moment they rushed through the narrow passage, Fei Tian Ye took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and let out a mad roar. He brandished his saber horizontally in front of him and dove down, meeting the living corpse troop head-on with a tornado of inner force as he dashed forward. His saber gleamed as it reflected the light, and with a whoosh, it had severed the heads of nearly 60 living corpses in succession. When he arrived in front of Chen Xing had an astonished look on his face, but Fei Tian Ye suddenly turned his wrist, his saber deviating at a very small angle from its current trajectory. The blade was less than 3 inches away from Chen Xing's face and brushed just past his nose, bringing with it a gust of cold wind. "Chen Xing!" Fei Tian Ye flexed his wrists, flicking off all of the residual rotten blood from his Huanshao saber with one movement. A clear, cold light was still visible on the tip of his blade. Good saber skills. When Chen Xing saw the blade coming at his neck, he thought that his head would be cut off as well and said with lingering trepidation, "Amazing. You flatter me, it's only because I had a sacred weapon." Previously, Fei Tian Ye was completely unprepared and wasn't able to deal with the living corpse's sneak attack. But now that he knew what he was up against, he wouldn't be defeated again. He immediately turned around and darted towards Xiangshu. Xiangshu watched the masked man closely, and now the masked man seemed to have some fear. He just wanted to settle this as soon as possible. With one pull of the trigger, 6 hidden arrows flew. This was the moment Xiangshu was waiting for. He brandished the longsword in his hand, and with 6 ding-ding-dings in succession, he had actually blocked every single one of those hidden arrows that were as thin as a strand of cow's hair. The masked man was stunned at once. Xiangshu jumped onto a stone platform and spun as he stabbed at the masked man's left hand with his sword. Feng Qianjun arrived soon afterwards. He took 2 steps to jump onto the stone pillar next to the platform, twisted his saber horizontally to hack downward as he aimed it at the masked man's neck. However, only the masked man's black robe was torn apart with a swish. The inside was empty. The cloth fluttered and rolled in the air, returning to its original appearance. The man withdrew and retreated. His mask fell to the ground, revealing his true face. Xiangshu's sword had only torn the man's sleeve, while Feng Qianjun's saber had picked his mask off. The mask fell and landed with a clang. The 2 men landed. Chen Xing ran to the front of the stone platform and looked up. The man's clear and graceful face was revealed as he looked down to study the 3 of them from above. He sneered. "And what monster is that?" Feng Qianjun frowned. Chen Xing was baffled. "I don't know. No one here knows him anyway. What does he need a mask for?" The man's voice was sharp, and his face was pale as he asked coldly, "Who are you?" Chen Xing said, "Who are you?" The man seemed doubtful. "Who are you?" "Chen Xing, tell me who you are first. What do you intend to do?" "He's stalling for time." Xiangshu saw that a nonsensical and endless conversation revolving around the words "Who are you?" and "Who are you?" was about to begin, and immediately spoke up to stop it. He shouted, "Don't waste time talking to him." Chen Xing sobered up upon hearing this. With a white light enveloping his left hand, he faced towards the sky and shouted, "Die!" Chen Xing exerted his utmost, and the heart lamp's light burst out in an instant, turning into countless light particles that diffused like the stars of the galaxy. Yet that man burst out with a sharp-sounding laugh. "Fool, it's not like I'm a drought fiend." The man was completely unharmed. He raised his right hand, and his hand expelled black flames that crushed the 3 people below and exploded with a loud blast. Chen Xing didn't expect that the sorcerer wouldn't fear the heart lamp's light at all. Feng Qianjun and Xiangshu turned around at the same time and lunged at Chen Xing. Xiangshu kicked Feng Qianjun away first before wrapping one arm around Chen Xing's waist and rolling away on the ground with him, then hid behind the stone platform. The 3 of them avoided the black flames. Xiangshu pushed Chen Xing behind the stone pillar before turning around and rushing out. At that moment, the crow of a rooster finally traveled over from a distance. The man in the black robe laughed maniacally and said in a frenzy, "It succeeded." Following which, on the central stone platform, black flames burst forth from Sima Wei's body with a loud bang and shot out from the crevices of his armor. They flashed and rose into the sky with the armor, then disintegrated into black light particles before flying northwest. The marble white color of the dawn sky emerged from the east. The black-robed man freed his other hand, shook both hands out, and with a crossbow in his left and a dagger in his right, he slowly descended. He faced Xiangshu and didn't consider Chen Xing and Feng Qianjun as threats at all, only focusing on dealing with Xiangshu. "He has no feet," Feng Qianjun said from behind the pillar. "Is he a ghost? How do we deal with him?" Chen Xing, "I don't know." Feng Qianjun, "Aren't you an exorcist?" Chen Xing, "But more importantly, I don't even know what he is." Chen Xing's mind raced. He had never seen such a monster in the ancient texts, yet Xiangshu held his long sword out and said calmly, "What exactly are you?" "I don't know either." The black-robed man with a pale face said, "It doesn't matter, take this." The black-robed man rushed at Xiangshu in an instant, but the attack with his dagger was immediately blocked by Xiangshu. This bastard could actually fly freely in the sky and shift around everywhere like a ghost. His dagger flew everywhere, creating countless illusions that cooperated with the strong crossbow in his left hand. No matter how Xiangshu tried to behead him, all he could do was tear at the black robe on this monster without harming him in the slightest. Feng Qianjun saw that the opponent was really difficult to deal with, so he could only wield his long saber in one hand and rush out again. There must be a way. Chen Xing persistently activated the heart lamp and thought, would it work if I just press the magic directly on his face to burn him? The heart lamp in his hand would be strong at times and weak at others. It fluctuated continuously. Suddenly he realized something. The iron sword in Xiangshu's hand was actually starting to flicker with a brilliant light in time with Chen Xing's flurry of activations of the heart lamp. Xiangshu came to the same realization and glanced at Chen Xing while he had his hands full. Sword! Xiangshu shouted. At that moment, Feng Qianjun had already rushed forward to cut off the lower half of the black-robed man's body. Black flames instantaneously erupted from the bottom of his robe and swept across the central area of the cemetery. Chen Xing immediately raised his left hand, crouched down, and pressed it down towards Xiangshu from a distance. In the next moment, the iron sword in Xiangshu's hands shone with a dazzling white light that collided with the black flames. Like a scorching sun that melted blood, it expelled the black flames until it had almost completely vanished. The black-robed man was stunned, and was just about to straighten up to dodge when Feng Qianjun jumped off a stone pillar from behind and swung his saber down at the man's head, forcing the black-robed man back onto the ground. Xiangshu wielded his sword with both hands, drew a radiant arc as he swung his sword, turned and took a quick step, and stabbed the man with a turn of his hand. The long sword, augmented with the magic of the heart lamp, stabbed and pierced through the black-robed man's chest. He released a blood-curdling screech and began to quiver uncontrollably. Why, with this light, the black flames under the black-robed man turned into a white flare in a split second and erupted in all directions, scorched into ashes. Don't know. The three of them answered in unison. Chen Xing added, I wouldn't tell you even if I did know, you can only blame yourself for your own bad luck. There was a loud blast, and the black-robed man was burned into countless light particles and disappeared with a flash. His black robe landed on the ground, then spontaneously ignited, burning with a blazing fire. Eventually, ashes will be ashes, and dust will be dust, nothing remained. The crimson sun rose at the edge of Mt. Longzhong, illuminating the cemetery midway up the mountain. The omnipresent anguished wails of the Jin army gradually diminished. The doubts in Chen Xing's heart grew. He looked up at Xiangshu, who bowed down to pick up the mask that had fallen from the black-robed man's face. End chapter. Dinghai Fusion Records. Chapter 8. Journey. Early morning, my city. Corpses have turned. Someone rushed over in a panic and roared madly, in the government office, dead corpses have turned. Do not spread lies. A soldier blocked him at my city's entrance, dealing with a surge of people, and shouted, all of you, head back. There's no such thing. It's all rumors. Rumors. In the government office, the county magistrate, a group of clerical officials and a local general watched the living corpse of a Jin soldier that was detained in a cage. A chain dragged behind the living corpse with turbid eyes as it struggled within the huge metal cage. We must quickly, the county magistrate tried to compose himself, escort this monster to Jiankang and report to the imperial court. My city's county deputy magistrate said, Your Excellency, this humble person thinks. This matter absolutely can't be suppressed. The county magistrate snapped out of his stupor and shouted, Xiangyang has fallen, and the number of people who died in the war number in the hundreds of thousands. If all of their corpses turn, no matter how many living people you have, can they fight against the dead? Hurry up and escort it away as soon as possible. Present a memorial to the throne to request for the imperial court's decision. Northwest of Mt. Longshan, at the exit of the mountain. The dog had been waiting in place for an entire night. It ran over all the way and kept wagging its tail at Chen Xing. The three of them stopped momentarily and found a place to sit down at the end of the plank road. Feng Qianjun went to search for the horses that had escaped earlier. Fortunately, they had not run far. Meanwhile, Xiang Shu went to take the reins of the horse he had brought over himself. He stood on the plank road and looked at the mountainous scenery without uttering a word. Feng Qianjun exchanged information with the other two. Apparently, the Jin army had known about the situation in Mt. Longzhong since long ago. After all, people who had recently fled from the village midway up the mountain had wanted to report the case to the Xiangyang authorities. However, Xiangyang was under a siege, so they had to turn to my city. The my city's government, on account of the rumor that the Qin army would unleash a large-scale offensive on the city, had already been on tenterhooks in the first place. They were afraid that the reports were a ruse by the enemy troops to create a diversion, and the people couldn't explain themselves clearly either, so the matter was temporarily suppressed. To be exact, Feng Qianjun said, up until last night, it has coincidentally been 49 days since then. Xiang Shu had his back facing the other two and never interrupted. Do you want to eat something? Chen Xin took the initiative to greet Xiang Shu. Xiang Shu just ignored him. Chen Xin pondered for a long time, then answered. It is related to the chance number 7, so there is a cause. But you shouldn't have brought them over. Feng Qianjun answered, I tried to stop them, but it was useless. When the horse returned to my city with the dead Jin soldier on its back, the people finally panicked. The county magistrate saw that the soldiers he had dispatched to investigate the news hadn't returned in 2 days. Now that he saw the corpse, he knew that the matter could no longer be suppressed. He quickly sent another team to enter Mt. Longshan within one night. The leader already knew of the tomb's location from the information they had obtained before. Feng Qianjun had wanted to go over alone to assist Chen Xin, but he failed to persuade the others, and could only follow along behind them. As a result, all of the Jin soldiers died in their line of duty. After getting rid of the mysterious black-robed man, Xiang Shu lit up a fire and burned all the corpses. Now, Chen Xin's only worry was the scene of Sima Wei, clad in black armor, turning into black flaming meteors at the last moment, and flying away. The real story must be rather complicated. Someone must be plotting something somewhere in the divine land, yet they had zero clues on it. Nearly 100 years ago, the successors of the Jin dynasty were fatuous and incompetent. The 8 princes gathered troops and fought for the throne, causing the Central Plains to be embroiled in war. During the Civil War, Han people attacked one another. The internal discord was significant, and led to the vacating of garrisons outside the 5 passes and famine for several years. Only tens of thousands of people who could fight remained. Xianna seized the opportunity to go south. Guanzhong fell. Han members of gentry took a ferry to the south, resulting in the separate governance of the north and south areas. History records show that Sima Wei, the king of Chu, was only 21 years old when he died. He had a tall and imposing build and an outstanding countenance, but was executed for acting on the pretext of an imperial edict. That is, he fabricated an imperial edict and gathered troops to crusade against treacherous court officials. After his death, Sima Wei was conferred a posthumous title General of the Cavalry, and was buried in Mt. Longzhong, a precious feng shui area situated in Jingchu, the feudal land. Xiang Shu, do you know something? Chen Xin now felt that the series of unimaginable strange occurrences were merely secondary to him. Xiang Shu's identity and motive was what he was most concerned about. Xiang Shu glanced at Chen Xin, but his attention was not on him. He answered, I just wanted to cross the path there to get to Chang'an and ended up meddling in other people's business on the way. Chen Xin asked out of curiosity, why do you want to go to Chang'an? Perhaps it was because the 3 of them had just gone through a life and death situation together the previous night. The barrier between them had somewhat broken down. Or perhaps it was because Chen Xing's heart lamp proved that he was indeed an authentic Sikh sorcerist, so Xiang Shu's attitude had taken an obvious turn for the better. Xiang Shu repeatedly turned the mask over in his hands as he examined it. Just as he turned to face Chen Xing, Chen Xing subconsciously leaned closer to Feng Qianjun. Stop bullying me all the time. Chen Xing was a little afraid of Xiangshu and braced himself to say this. Wei. Feng Qianjun was also a little afraid of Xiangshu, he couldn't beat him after all, so he also braced himself to say, don't bully little brother Chen Xing, it's not like he provoked you in any way. Didn't provoke me? You Han people don't even know how to distinguish right from wrong and played deceitful tricks to trick me into going to Jiangdong from Jinzhou, then imprisoned me up until now. Xiangshu made light of it as he continued, if Xiangyang city hadn't fallen, I would have already turned into a decayed corpse at the bottom of a prison by now, and you want me to shed tears of gratitude for you? Forget it, ba. Chen Xing flared up when he heard this, it's not like I knew what kind of experiences you had to go through. And didn't I save you? When did I ever ask you to shed tears of gratitude for me? Let me ask you this, did you not believe in what I said last time? So do you believe me now? You're a who? As soon as Feng Qianjun saw Xiangshu's face, he immediately choked back the second half of his sentence, but you don't look like one, forcefully. He guessed that Xiangshu didn't like to be questioned about his identity, so he quickly said, calm down. Don't fight. Then he hastily brokered a compromise, well, since we're all heading to Chang'an, let's all go together then. Xiangshu didn't say another word and mounted his horse. As soon as he clamped down on his horse's belly, he had already galloped far away. Chen Xing was halfway through eating his rations and quickly said, wait. You haven't told me why you're going to Chang'an. He had to put his dog beside the saddle while Feng Qianjun packed up, and they spurred their horses to set out. Xiangshu kept a distance from them as he rode ahead. Chen Xing and Feng Qianjun were about 10 or more zhang behind, engaged in quiet discussion as they rode their horses side by side. Your protector doesn't appear to be a bad person, Feng Qianjun said, trust me, he won't stab you with his sword simply over a minor disagreement. Yes, he'll just throw money at me. Chen Xing replied. He threw that gold ingot to test my strength. Feng Qianjun said, he had already noticed that I was behind you at that time, and even if you hadn't dodged it, it wouldn't have really hit you. Then I'll really have to thank him for his mercy. Chen Xing didn't agree with Feng Qianjun, he thought, this person is a bastard, he even snatched my stuff. Chen Xing frowned deeply and observed Xiangshu, who wasn't too far ahead. He asked Feng Qianjun, why is he going to Chang'an? To find people from his tribe. Feng Qianjun said, isn't that obvious? The Hu people are all in the north, and Chang'an is under the control of Emperor Qin, Fujian. Chen Xing suddenly recalled the line speculated to be a military official on the register Zhu Su had showed him. Perhaps they had seized some sort of precious item from Xiangshu when they captured him for them to arrive at such an inference. What kind of a person was he? Commander of a 100? A field officer? A position that a 20-year-old could assume shouldn't be too high, so it was impossible for him to be a general. Feng Qianjun, however, I don't think he has any intention of being your protector. Chen Xing said insipidly, I sensed that a long time ago. Chen Xing turned it over in his mind. He recalled once more the body of Sima Wei that had turned into black flames before flying away. At that time, it was heading northwest, which happens to be in the direction of Chang'an. But Liangzhou and other places were even further northwest. There must be a tremendous force behind the black-robed masked man, but he didn't know where they were hiding right now, and what they were plotting. What did they intend with the revival of the corpse that had turned into bones nearly 100 years ago? The power of the heart lamp had disappeared for more than 300 years along with the silence that descended upon all magic. Did it now emerge because this covert force was scheming a conspiracy? Chen Xing frowned the entire way in silence, and again looked up at Xiangshu who was far ahead. Xiangshu's explanation for this incident was him simply meddling in other people's business, but Chen Xing always felt that he knew more than he was letting on. But if he knew something, Wasn't that more reason for him to earnestly talk about it with Chen Xing? Chen Xing was utterly perplexed. Fortunately, Xiangshu didn't bother them along the way, just as Feng Qianjun had guessed. On this journey to the northwest, they would stay in inns if they could find one and sleep outdoors if they were in the wilderness. Turbulent wars persisted for years. Lands stretching from the north of Jingjiang to Hanzhong had been plundered many times, so 9 houses out of 10 had been deserted long ago. When they couldn't find any inns, the 3 of them could only spend the night in abandoned houses without roofs. Chen Xing gazed at the vast sky filled with stars and calculated the number of days with his fingers. He was born in late October-autumn, so he only had less than 3 years and 8 months remaining. He had to find the ruins of the headquarters of exorcism in Chang'an as soon as possible, and hopefully he would be able to find the reason for the silence that befell all magic. The best outcome would have been for him to do the most he could and use the remaining few years of his life to retrieve the lost magic in the human world. He would then pass it on to the next generation of exorcists, so that they would be able to deal with the emergence of Mara in the future. But unexpectedly, another wave had risen before the preceding wave could pass. An unexpected setback appeared out of nowhere in the form of that black-robed man. Without a clue in sight, this matter made Chen Xing inexplicably vexed the more he thought about it. He tossed and turned about, unable to sleep, so he got up to go out for a walk. Under the moonlight, he saw Xiangshu in a small stream behind the dilapidated village. He was in a pair of long trousers as he wiped his upper body with cold water. Chen Xing gave a cursory glance before walking to the stream. Xiangshu didn't shun him and just remained where he stood. When Chen Xing rescued him from prison, Xiangshu was so emaciated he didn't seem human. But now, not even 10 days had passed, and he was already more or less recovered. The moonlight shone onto his damp shoulders and back, as if plating him with a layer of clear and crystalline silver light. "You're much better now than before," Chen Xing said. Xiangshu had fair skin, and after his muscles recovered, they were lean in a way that wasn't exaggerated, revealing contours reminiscent of running water. When he stood stark naked, he didn't seem like a fierce general at all, and instead possessed a somewhat refined aura. Without any clothes on, this was the perfect body of a literati, and Chen Xing just found it extremely strange. Along the way, Xiangshu would occasionally accept the rations Chen Xing gave him, yet he never accepted the food Feng Qianjun offered him. When they set up camp to rest, Xiangshu would even go hunting from time to time. Sometimes he would bring back deer, while at others he would bring back wild goats. He had to eat a lot of meat in one meal, and it was precisely because of that that his body recovered so quickly. "What do you plan to do in Chang'an?" When the two of them sat face to face, Xiangshu finally took the initiative to speak to Chen Xing. "Work." Chen Xing sat on the stone beside the stream and answered, "I'm an exorcist, I have my responsibilities." Xiangshu walked towards the shore, put on an unlined garment, and yanked the tie with both hands to tighten it. The white shirt that clung tightly to his body outlined the contours of his broad back, and he had the subtle impression of a reserved, but threatening presence. "Just to clarify," Chen Xing said, "you've made up your mind to not be a protector, right?" Xiangshu raised an eyebrow. So Chen Xing explained to him, there has always been someone in the role of a protector beside all exorcists, in order to protect the exorcists from any disturbances when they were exorcising yaos. And the protector by the side of the great exorcist who oversees headquarters has a resounding title, martial god. And now, there remains only one exorcist in the world, Chen Xing, so naturally he would be that great exorcist. As for the martial god, the heart lamp had chosen Xiangshu to take up that post. Chen Xing himself had no right to choose at all, and he also wanted to explain about magic and the divine land. "Find someone else." Xiangshu casually said, "You saved my life, and I saved yours, so we're even." Xiangshu had saved Chen Xing more than once, especially when Chen Xing acted so recklessly in front of Emperor Chu's tomb. If Xiangshu hadn't reacted quickly, Chen Xing would have been burned to death by the black flames. Although it wasn't certain that those black flames would burn him to death, but wasn't that what a protector was supposed to do? Chen Xing wasn't angry when he heard these words. In fact, for someone whose time was limited and only had 3 years and 8 more months to live, not many things could upset him. He would just feel a little unhappy at most. Okay. Chen Xing watched Xiang Shu's receding figure as he left and said, I didn't hold much hope in the first place, and at the very least I have to respect your decision. Since you've already rejected me, then after we arrive in Chang'an, let bridges be bridges and roads be roads. Xiang Shu left, leaving only Chen Xing behind as he faced the stream in melancholy. He had a lot of things he hasn't had the chance to tell Xiang Shu yet, including the relationship between exorcists and their protectors, and also of the era more than 300 years ago when exorcists flourished, where exorcists and their protectors depended on each other and would go through fire and water together. On his journey after leaving Mt. Hua, he had repeatedly imagined the appearance and temper of his protector, as well as how he would explain everything to his protector after meeting him. In the remaining 4 years of his life, he would at least have someone accompanying him by his side. He dared not wish for anything more, but at least he wouldn't be lonely. Ipiter's luck helped him solve all his problems, but it had no effect at all on this matter regarding Xiang Shu. Or perhaps, for this difficult problem that was related to the heart lamp and the luck of the divine land, even Ipiter was powerless. At first, Chen Xing was brimming with expectations and had intended to entrust his remaining 4 years to him, yet his expectations gradually turned into disappointment. There were a lot of things he wanted to explain to Xiang Shu, but what was the use of saying all that? Xiang Shu didn't care about it at all, nor was he concerned about it and couldn't even be bothered to pay attention to him. What should I do from now on? Get another one? But will the heart lamp change one for me? It's not like this is an affair of the heart where I can just change partners at will. Chen Xing had wanted to take a stroll to forget his worries at first, but his worries only increased, so he decided to just return to the house to sleep. However, now it has become even more difficult for him to sleep, and after thinking about it over and over, he only had one thought. It's all that bastard's fault. A few days later, Chen Xing decided that he might as well stop talking to Xiang Shu. Feng Qianjun knew that he had gone out in the middle of the night that night, so he didn't ask much. There were more and more populated villages along the way. Birds sang and fragrant flowers bloomed in spring. It was easier for them to find accommodation, and there was a place for the circulation of their silver taels and copper coins now. The 3 of them passed through Wu Pass in this manner. With a signed document from my city in hand, Chen Xing took the other 2 through the pass. They hastened on with their journey for a few more days before arriving at Chang'an city. Chang'an had gone through more than 100 years of war. Every time its master changed, Chang'an would suffer another round of plunder and arson. However, ever since the era where the city was named Hejin in the Zhou dynasty, it had stood on the west side of the divine land. The ancient city surrounded by 8 rivers was like an enormous tree that nourished the earth. It demonstrated its astonishing tenacity time and time again after each and every time it was set on fire and destroyed. Verdant and lush, happiness and prosperity, flourishing scenery would fill one's field of view. Within the pass, fire beacons had been lit up for days on end at the front line of a fierce battle with the south, yet Chang'an was at peace. Even though just 10 miles away, there were people from the central plains who had fled here from the calamity elsewhere and died from starvation and illness on the roadside and in the wilderness. The high city walls of Chang'an had blocked the plague, hunger, disaster, and war. It had also blocked death. Like an oasis filled with life in a barren desert, it had turned into a world of its own. The apex of the roof tiles of gold and jade mansion eaves could be seen adjacent to each other. The splendid Viang Palace was an auspicious omen, yet the master of the palace had changed long ago. The abundant flowers in Shanglin's park bloomed brilliantly with the coming of spring. People rode horses in the streets and spectate cockfights. People were laughing and chatting. Han and Hu people were living together harmoniously, and Hu people with high nose bridges and deep eyes came and went. Regardless of whether they were a Hu or a Han, everyone was dressed in gorgeous attire. Languages of the Di, Xia, Xianbei, and Tile people fell incessantly upon one's ears. The market was filled with a dazzling lineup of goods. The unending blue robes of scholars could be seen, whose hair crowns were like clouds. Chen Xing was only 5 years old the last time he came to Chang'an, so most of his memories regarding this place had long blurred into obscurity. Seeing the scene before him now, an indescribable feeling arose in Chen Xing's heart. Although Fujian is a Hu emperor, he managed to govern Chang'an quite well ma. Chen Xing said sourly. After nearly half a month of traveling with Feng Qianjun and Xiangshu, they were now travel-worn and looked like country bumpkins after entering Chang'an. Xiangshu was still adorned in a hunter's attire but was instead the one who didn't seem to pay much heed to it. He scrutinized a group of Hu people on a side street not far away. It seemed his attention had been roused from hearing the accent of his native place. Feng Qianjun said, "Yeah, maybe I should just spare that dog's life for a while." The three of them ordered a bowl of noodles at a noodle stall on a street in Chang'an, which was sufficient to serve as a farewell meal for this group of temporary travel companions. After the meal, Chen Xing inquired about someone from the waiter, while Feng Qianjun went to settle the bill and said, "Since we've arrived at Chang'an, why don't?" As he spoke, Feng Qianjun hesitated a little. He looked at Chen Xing and asked, "Why don't you go to Daja's lodging to stay for 2 days first?" Chen Xing knew that Feng Qianjun's offer was just out of courtesy. Although they had taken care of one another on the way here, ultimately they were still just strangers who had just met by chance. He quickly said, "I won't trouble Brother Feng anymore. I have a place to go to, and I've just gotten some news on it. He is indeed in Chang'an, so it just so happens that I can seek shelter with an old friend here. Could you help me raise the puppy for a while? It's not convenient for me to take care of it for the time being." "That's all right." Feng Qianjun picked up the dog and said readily, "If you encounter any trouble, just send a letter to the Songbei residence in the west of the city. From the looks of it, I'll probably have to stay in Chang'an for a period of time." As for Xiangshu, Feng Qianjun didn't ask him anything and only whistled at him, "I'll entrust Tianke to your care." Chen Xing thought, what does it have to do with him? Feng Qianjun promptly put on his bamboo hat, placed his hands in his sleeves, and walked into the street before disappearing into the crowd. End chapter.